Welcome to this edition of In-Depth Alaska. I'm Tracy Sinclaire, and with me today is our chief meteorologist, Melissa Frey. And just last Sunday, we had this massive windstorm, and we want to talk about that and talk about the process of forecasting something like that. But before we do that, give us a little bit of an idea of your background. How did you get into meteorology?
Ooh, okay. I can do the short version or the long version. Basically, when I was a kid, I was really interested in the weather. I wanted to know, why are some clouds big? Why are some thin? How come sometimes we get rain or snow or hail or sleet? And I was just really curious. Also, my dad was a pilot in the Air Force, and he was a navigator, actually. And when he flew, they didn't have modern navigation equipment. They had to fly by white caps and by constellations and stars. And so he just had a lot of great knowledge, and he would tell me those things as a kid, and I would look to the sky with so much fascination. And I was like, I got to figure this out. I want to do this. So I knew I wanted to go into meteorology. I really thought I would do that through the Air Force. And I got to tour a TV station and kind of shadow a TV meteorologist. And I was like, wow, that looks like fun. I love people. I love being with people. And through high school, I really learned that I'm not shy in front of big groups of people, even though as a kid, I really was a shy kid. So I was like, man, I could help people with this information while I get to kind of geek out and learn about it. I thought, sure, why not? Let's go for it. And here we are, 20 whatever years later.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about this storm a little bit. You started talking about the storm on Thursday. That's kind of when you started spreading the word here in the newsroom, like, this is coming, this is going to be big. Now, how far in advance do you look for things like this? And, when do you say, okay, now's the point that we need to start talking about this?
Yeah, so I kind of have my own personal rule with forecasting. If I know something, I want the public to know something. I'm never going to withhold that information. Obviously, if it's a real outlier and there's not a lot of confidence in it, I'm not going to go out and say, hey, you need to prepare. There's a slight potential of something. But if I have any confidence this stuff is coming together, I'm going to let you know about that as soon as I have that confidence. And it was really Wednesday. I just went back and looked at those discussions. And Wednesday, I said, hey, it's going to be wet and windy this weekend. Big storm coming in. So Wednesday, that's all you knew from me. Big storm, wet and windy this weekend. And then by Thursday, I was like, this is extreme, potentially historic, record-breaking storm. And then we just continued to refine those details between Thursday and then as the event came through on Sunday.
And so meteorology, I know from experience, obviously it's not just straight science. You can't look at something and say, this is going to happen. A lot of it is interpretation or experience with models. How does somebody gain that? And how do you gain the confidence to say, like you did, this is going to be big, could be record breaking?
So it obviously depends on the event and what we're talking about. This particular scenario was kind of a textbook situation, and everyone agreed. All the models agree. So when we're making a forecast, we use a lot of different data sources. So basically, you have weather models, and there's, half a dozen or so that we use on a regular basis. I can look at maybe 4 different regular models that do pretty good for Alaska on a given day and get 4 completely different answers. That's actually pretty common that happens. In this scenario with this wind event, they were all saying the same thing. Oh, wow. And I just kept back and checking them. And we get model updates about every 6 hours. So every 6 hours, I'm checking these model updates. And really from Thursday on, they were all locked in together. Anytime I see 4 weather models and the National Weather Service locked in together, I have pretty high confidence at that point. And there was no variability. We weren't seeing the time shifting. We weren't seeing the location of where the low pressure was going to go shifting. It was just locked in and consistent. So fortunately for me as a forecaster, the models really did an excellent job. Now, when we're forecasting, this is one way I kind of like to describe it. Okay, imagine you're out in Palmer and you throw a stick into the river, and you have to determine at what point is that stick going to show up near Anchorage, and where is it going to show up near Anchorage? Well, at first you're like, well, it's impossible. But then if you really start to think about it, you go, well, okay, I know the density and the weight of the stick, right? I know how fast it's going to move in the water, and I know how fast the water is moving. So you can break that down to math. You get the equations for how fast is the water moving, how long is it going to take, and you can sort of start to calculate that. If it's a straight river, no issues, you probably would get a pretty good answer. Now, we know there's other variabilities in there, like maybe there's a large boulder in the middle of the river. So what is that going to do to the stick? Okay, this is still science and math. We can calculate that. And that's what these weather models do, is break it down to the mathematical level and take into account the physics of it. Now, there's some other unknown factors, like let's say a beaver comes swimming across the river and picks up the stick. Okay, then what happens? Do you know that that beaver's there? Maybe you know there's a beaver hanging out on a rock and could pick up the stick, so you consider that. But that's where the human comes in. So models, they do an excellent job, especially in 2025, the computing power that we have to take in just such a ridiculous amount of data. And now to process that very quickly because of the computing power that we have, we actually get pretty good results with models. But it's all based on those initial observations. So the more initial observations you have, the better it is. But the models still have little differences, and that's why their output can be different. And that's where a human goes, oh no, I saw there was a beaver sitting on that rock, and it's going to pick up that stick, and I'm going to watch it, and oh yeah, there the beaver goes, and so I'm going to recalculate this based on that, and that's something the model isn't aware of. So that's obviously just a funny example, but that's really what we do with storms like this. We get the models are going, okay, yeah, this, X, Y, or Z is going to happen, and we watch it, and we go, no, that's not physically possible for that to happen, what it's thinking to happen. In this wind event, this actually was all very possible. It's very textbook. You could use this as a Meteorology 101 explanation of large areas of low pressure. This had a warm front and a cold front. It had a triple point low in the middle. These are all meteorology terms we use. But the way it was coming in, we go, yeah, this is a big storm. The footprint alone of this storm spread from the Bering Sea all the way down into Canada. It was massive. At one point or another, the entire state of Alaska, which we know is quite large, was sitting under this storm system. So if our elevation across the state were completely flat, if we didn't have oceans and ice and mountains and all these things that impact our weather, that alone would have been a really impressive storm and would have brought significant impacts. But you throw in some mountains, you throw in some water, and things get a little more interesting. And so that's why we had the extreme winds that we did, was because of how that low pressure system interacted with our local mountains in Anchorage.
And so give us a kind of an explanation of that. We talked about downsloping winds.
Yes.
That's a term that you use. Explain to people how downsloping affects the winds and the temperature.
Yes, so you've heard this term Chinook winds, and Chinook winds really originated, I believe, if I'm correct, down in the Pacific Northwest, in that area named after Chinook people, because of mountain ranges there. It's used also to describe weather events in the Rockies, and we use it here in Anchorage also, and across the interior, anywhere you're on the leeward side of a mountain range. So when you get heating from winds, what happens is the air descends down the mountain. If the air is going down the mountain, it is going to heat up. That is a physical property of air. If it descends down, it's going to compress and it's going to heat. And that has to do with gravity really pulling it down. If it's colder, denser air, it wants to stay stable. I always say air just wants to be happy. It just wants to be
stable.
Yes, it just wants to be in the current state. And so if you have massive wind pushing up over a mountain range, and then all of a sudden gravity drops out from underneath it, that air is going to descend rapidly, it compresses, and it heats up. So that doesn't necessarily make those winds faster, but it will cause the air to heat up. So anytime air is coming from East Anchorage and flowing into the lower elevations of the rest of the Anchorage Bowl, is likely going to heat us up. We get those southeast winds, the Chinook wind that heats us up. That is one physical principle of the air coming over the mountains. In this scenario, the winds were strong regardless of the mountains. Right. So they were already strong. We saw those wind gusts like to 160 miles per hour.
That was crazy.
Yes.
I when I saw those numbers, I was just like, oh my gosh. And
yes.
I realized it was very high up and there aren't people there.
Right.
But I still don't recall ever seeing that number on
Yeah.
those recordings.
So when you get to the jet stream, we're talking like more than halfway up in the atmosphere. That's obviously where the fastest winds are. But those winds, you would say 1 to 200 miles per hour. You know, these pilots that are coming out of Anchorage, they'll tell you those winds up there are pretty fast. But you don't expect those winds down on the surface because we have, you know, friction and other things preventing it. But so 160 miles per hour at 4,000 feet. But yeah, that's 4,000 feet. So it's higher, but it's because of that large area of low pressure. Had nothing to do with wind, with the mountain range making it faster. But on in Anchorage, the scenario was that you've got those really fast winds coming over the top of the mountain. They come down, you know, because of gravity, like I explained, and right along the edge of the foothills. What happens is that's where the mountain range hits the surface, that wind kind of crashes into the ground. And that's when you get those 70 plus mile per hour winds that we saw right along Seward Highway. We saw winds to over 70 miles per hour also along Muldoon.
Right.
Now, if you go to that neighborhood, which had all of that damage, roof damage, fences, trees, everything blown off, they are right at the base of that steep mountain range of the Chugach Mountains. It comes right down, rolling down, and the winds increase as it hits the surface.
Now, looking back at your forecast, and then I've got a couple more questions about weather in general for the year so far, or for the season. Looking back at your forecast, it obviously played out just as you had said it would. Is there anything you would have changed?
Ooh, that is a good question. So in general, I'm pretty hard on myself. After an event like this, anytime we have big impact weather, I will lay in bed at night and go, oh man, woulda, shoulda, coulda. Like, I should have said this. I should have explained this better. One thing that I will say just in general that I always feel about forecasting in Alaska is I never can give enough attention to everyone. So in this event, we really focused on the high impacts and the extreme conditions, which was East Anchorage and the Anchorage hillside. But we had really significant weather going on in the valley and also down on the Kenai Peninsula. Right. Southeast had a separate situation, not to mention what's happening in Western Alaska and the record heat that we're seeing across the interior. And there was just so much going on. So I'm always looking for ways that I can, in my same, 4-minute weather forecast, how can I give everyone enough of a heads up of what's coming? I was really happy with the fact that we were able to warn people. Really, Thursday is when I went on air and went on social media and digital saying, you need to prepare for this storm. If you have a trampoline, tie it down. If you have a loose barbecue or grill, like secure it. If you have any sort of awning, bring it down. That's, what was that, 4 days ahead of the storm?
Yeah.
And so I was happy that we were able to give people that heads up. And I just consistently kept telling people, hey, you have time. Take advantage of the time. We don't always get time like that to prepare.
Right.
So take advantage of it. And then, just work through the day, Saturday and Sunday, to keep people updated and informed, because you start to see those first wind gusts and you go, wait, is this a storm? Is it, is this it? Is it done? And so just wanting people to know what's coming. Yes. Yeah. I could tell you, there's a million things I wish I could have done differently all the time.
Well, I felt like, not to toot our own horn, but I feel like we did, you started talking on Thursday. On Friday, we did several things on power outages, because usually, like in the lower 48, you watch the national weather and you will hear them say, this storm will bring power outages. We often don't say that, but this one was, you were saying, and the National Weather Service was saying, this will likely cause power outages. So we could talk to people. And like I charged my extra phone battery and found where my flashlights were. Things that when the power goes out, you don't want to spend time looking for. And so I feel like we did a good job of getting it. You're right. There's just not enough time sometimes to cover the whole state. So you have to focus on
Yeah.
What's kind of highest priority at that time.
And I do want to say, too, to that point of us letting people know about those tips, some power outage tips ahead of time. I did have a friend come up to me and say, okay, you're kind of scaring me now that you have started giving us tips. That kind of raised the severity in their mind of what it is. They're like, is it really going to be that bad? And I was like, yes, it is. And I'm glad that they took it that way, because we are not just going to go out there and start giving you tips on power outages if we don't really believe there's going to be power outages. And if you've watched me over the years, hopefully the viewers know that from me. I'm not going to alarm just to alarm. I'm only going to put out that kind of language if I truly believe all the ingredients are there for it to happen.
And that was the case.
And that was the case
and
this time.
That clearly turned out. Are these kinds of storms, I'm going to guess the answer to this one, because we don't see these kinds of storms typically. Are they more frequent in the winter? Would this have considered a winter storm? To me, this feels a little out of context. Like it doesn't feel like we would normally have it at this time of year.
Well, the amount of heat that we've had just in general recently obviously is a little funky compared to what's normal. This storm is one that you would get in the late fall, winter seasons. Okay. And the reason for the way that those winds set up is because of the cold air mass that is in the upper levels of the atmosphere, combining with that warm, moist air pushing it off from the Pacific. If the entire column of the air were warm and moist, you wouldn't have the dynamics to get as extreme as what we got. So really it's that contrast of the cold air aloft, that warm Pacific air pushing in with a lot of moisture. And when you get more moisture and more heat, then you get more condensation, and that whole water cycle really is more amplified. And so all of that contributed to the strength of the wind and the strength of the temperature increases.
Well, it just, and I know we were talking about it yesterday, it just feels like a weird winter. Like, there's green grass out there. There's Nelson Lagoon, I believe, sent us pictures of a bear.
Oh, the poor bears.
Got confused and got up and is running around because it's so warm.
Yeah.
And so it just feels like a strange winter to me.
Now, I will say, yes, 100%, this is a strange winter. No matter how you look at the numbers, it's not normal. But really, for the last 3 years, we haven't seen much normal, at least in the winter. We've had some normal summers, but we have, in the news industry, we have people that move here from out of state quite frequently. And the amount of times that I've told new people that have just moved here, this isn't normal. Don't worry. This isn't normal. I've said that so many times, and people keep saying, Melissa, okay, when is normal?
Yeah. When will we see what is supposed to be happening?
Yes. So obviously we had the 2 El Niños. We had the crazy snow the last 2 years. It wasn't record-setting snow, but it was historic snow levels that we saw, with a lot of records for daily snow events throughout the year. Both last year and the year before, we know it was crazy in Anchorage how much snow we had. So to go from that to the opposite, the extreme, and now we are officially in a La Nina. Never in history have we seen this combination of El Niños and La Ninas together. So this pattern is unprecedented in itself. So often we can look at El Niños or La Ninas or back-to-back La Ninas and go, oh, well, history repeats itself. So the last time we saw 2 La Ninas or 2 El Niños, this is what happened. We don't have history to look at for this particular thing. So we're kind of flying here in new territory in that regard with global ocean circulations and all that. But yeah, this year, I just keep waiting for it to turn. And actually, Aaron Morrison, our morning meteorologist, and I talk every morning about the weather forecasts. And, we're seeing a trend, and trends do continue. But I just keep waiting for that trend to end and for us to flip the switch back to normal, which, that happens. Of course. Right. Of course that can happen. We could switch going into February and all of a sudden have historic snow. The rest of January, I can tell you, though, that's not going to happen. January is going to be warm and drier than normal. Yeah.
The things that I say to the new people is, I just said it to our new producer, was we don't get ice like they get in the lower 48. We get snow, it melts, and then, or it wears away and the roads are fine, so you get snow, but we don't get ice. We've got ice.
We've got lots
We've
of
got
ice.
a lot of ice these last couple of years
Yeah.
with these historic melts. Now, we don't get the ice storms that they get down there,
Right.
where you get coatings of ice on things, but it does seem odd that my driveway is almost clear again,
Yes.
and grass is showing through.
I mean, we have had dry snow years. We have had warm winters, but I don't remember. I mean, I've only been here 9 years, so it's a pretty short history. But in my short 9 years, I don't ever remember seeing green grass. There have been times we've had grass, but the grass is green.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people have been asking me, like, is it possible that we just kind of fade into spring like 2 months early? Like, is that possible that we just kind of start to see flowers coming up and buds on trees and things warming up and we skip that whole breakup season? And I mean, anything's possible at this point, but we still have a lot of winter to go as well.
Yeah, we still.
Yeah.
February is typically
Cold and snowy.
cold and snowy. Well, and what I have to remind myself, it always feels like January and February are our darkest months.
Yes.
But this is when we're gaining daylight.
We're gaining a lot at this point.
And so I have
Yeah.
to remind myself that it is actually getting brighter.
Yes.
And so the more and more sunlight is headed our direction.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like I need that this year.
Yes, yeah. I just personally, the weather doesn't affect me that much, probably because I look at it so much. It doesn't affect my mood so much. But this year, I think I've started to notice, like, I'm craving some sunshine. And we get those days like yesterday where we get, 4 hours of beautiful blue skies, and I just want to be outside the whole time.
Yeah.
Because it's really nice. And our heat, I just pulled the numbers. I don't know if you're curious.
I am curious.
But I pulled the numbers comparing our top 5 snowiest years and just comparing winter to summer. People keep asking me, does this mean a bad or dangerous wildfire season because of the lack of snow? And do you have any indication on what this means for our summers? Like, does this mean a warmer and drier summer? And I will tell you, the years that we have had low snow, the top 5 lowest snow years, 3 of those years were the top 5 warmest summers. So there is possibly
If you're looking for
some
sunshine. Okay.
some correlation there in terms of just pure heat. Now, in terms of fire danger, the years that we've had big fire years in terms of acres burned don't really have a correlation to how much snow we had. That has a lot more to do with conditions at the time. Obviously, how the fire was started, where it started. In the spring, there is a really dangerous stretch where the snow has melted but green up hasn't happened. That's really the dangerous spot for wildfires to start. But that doesn't really matter how much snow we have or not. It has more to do with the conditions at the time.
Yeah, I remember talking to a climatologist about that and how because the top layers will dry out so quickly that even if you had the snow or you get a day of rain, a couple days later it is dried out so fast. And that what I also find interesting is that our fire season is earlier in the year than the rest of the lower
Right.
48. Theirs is all from drying throughout the summer, and then it happens toward the end of summer. By that point, we've got rain
Right.
that's helping to fight those fires, which is actually good because then when we need help, they have personnel that they can send,
Yeah.
and we can send personnel when they need help. So it is nice
Yeah.
that there's a little bit of balance for that. One more question, and then we'll let you go because you have your forecast to do for today. What's your favorite part about doing this job?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I think it's like a puzzle every day that I'm trying to figure out. And sometimes puzzles are really frustrating, but sometimes they're also really rewarding. So I do like that. I'm kind of a data geek. Like, I love analyzing things and looking at data and looking at the numbers. I've always been that way. So this job allows me to do that on a consistent basis. I have a master's degree in atmospheric science, and through grad school, that gave me the opportunity to really learn what I don't know. So through that process, I learned how big the atmosphere is, how complex it is, and so I will never simplify it down to kind of a black and white scenario. So that makes the job very frustrating because you just want to put everything, in its right place. But it keeps me on my toes. I mean, there's never a dull day, right? I mean, every day is completely different. It's not often that I have to take my work home with me. It pretty much stays here unless we're in the middle of a big storm. And I just love interacting with people. I love getting kids excited about science and the potential of going into STEM careers. I mean, I could go on and on all day about all the things that I love about
That's
it.
great.
Yes, there's not much that I don't love about it.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
So thank you, Chief Meteorologist Melissa Frey here at Alaska's News Source, and thank you for joining us for In Depth Alaska. Please like and subscribe to this podcast.